Finland shares the second longest border with Russia and Europe. It extends for 800 miles through thick forests and snow across essentially a no man's land where hardly anybody at all actually lives. Everyone thinks Russia maintains total control over its northern border and Arctic dominance. But Finland has quietly built a NATO-integrated surveillance powerhouse that can monitor every Russian movement in real time. While Russia struggles with aging infrastructure and resource constraints, Finland is building precision capabilities that target specific vulnerabilities. But why Russia's Northern Fleet is facing an unprecedented resource crisis that forces impossible choices, how Finland leveraged advanced NATO surveillance systems to create total intelligence dominance over its massive border, and why satellite imagery reveals Russia frantically building defensive positions instead of projecting strength, is the secret you're about to discover. No one expected Finland to be the one to humiliate Moscow right on Russia's border. Finland officially joined NATO on April 2023. Since then, the country has rapidly fortified its defenses with systems specifically designed to detect and neutralize Russian movement instantly. The Finnish border guard completed the first 35 kilometers of a planned 200-kilometer fence on its eastern border with Russia by May 2025, equipped with cameras and sensors capable of distinguishing between people and animals. Joint exercises with NATO have stepped up dramatically, with Finland now having access to NATO intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities through the RQ-4D Phoenix program. Finnish forces are training with precision-guided weapons and have launched a major plan to re-equip their forces with technical intelligence, SIGINT technologies, in response to the Russian threat. But what's even more concerning for Moscow, Putin assumed the West would hesitate. But according to Major General Sami Nurmi, head of strategy of the Finnish Defense Forces, they are monitoring Moscow's maneuvering very closely and preparing for Russia to start to bring back the forces that have been fighting in Ukraine, especially land forces, once the war ends. New surveillance data shows Russian aircraft being tracked in real time through NATO's integrated air defense systems, with zero margin for stealth operations. Inside Russian command, the situation is worse. The Norwegian intelligence reported in February 2025 that the Russian naval forces are facing a widening gap between ambitions and resources, forcing the Northern Fleet to choose between solving missions and performing necessary maintenance. But these aren't the only things reshaping the map. Finland's quiet rise is exposing how unprepared Russia truly is, not just in the Arctic, but across every border they once thought was secure. When it comes to the Arctic and Russia's northern defenses, the situation isn't much better. It's systematically compromised. Russia has long claimed dominance in the Arctic, but intelligence assessments reveal a different reality. The Russian armed forces reverted to Soviet-era Moscow and Leningrad military districts in early 2024, officially ending OSK Sever and the Northern Fleet's status as a formal military district. Several airfields near the Finnish and Norwegian borders are operating at reduced capacity due to maintenance backlogs and resource constraints. The Northern Fleet faces a critical lack of docking capacity at all shipyards on the Kola Peninsula. Putin's ambitious plans to dominate the Arctic have been put on hold due to a lack of funding. Satellite imagery reveals a vast, irregular, and disorganized network of forward bases and outposts in the Russian Arctic, with the Kremlin now prioritizing completion and maintenance of existing infrastructure over expansion. But what is particularly telling is that Finland has quietly begun to exploit these weaknesses. Instead of confrontation, it is using joint surveillance with Sweden and Norway to quietly dominate the region's intelligence map. Together with NATO, Finland now has access to command structures in the Arctic that previously belonged only to superpowers, while Russia struggles to maintain what experts describe as a crumbling presence. And while Russia is trying to project force, Finland is building precision by tracking and infiltrating Russian defense systems. But when it comes to Russia's northern border, recent events have exposed catastrophic vulnerabilities that even Moscow can no longer ignore. What was once considered an untouchable defensive wall was dramatically compromised on June 1, 2025. when Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb reached deep into the Russian Arctic. The operation targeted Olenia Air Base, located 90 kilometers south of Murmansk and 200 kilometers from the Norwegian border, destroying more than 40 strategic bombers and surveillance aircraft, valued at an estimated $7 billion on small FPV drones, each costing less than $1,000, managed to penetrate what should be one of Russia's most heavily defended facilities. But here's the thing. No one inside Russia seems willing to admit the full extent of the vulnerability. While the Defense Ministry releases staged footage of exercises and patrols, internal documents and intelligence assessments reveal that key regions are severely understaffed and underfunded. The few elite units that once protected the north have been redeployed to Ukraine, leaving bases near Murmansk operating at minimal capacity. Air defense batteries along the Finnish border have not been modernized in more than a decade, and some Russian soldiers stationed in these regions report going weeks without proper logistical support. Russia's early warning network, once its pride, is now compromised in key sectors, with GPS jamming capabilities that often affect Norwegian pilots in Finnmark but fail to protect its own strategic assets from precision strikes. But it doesn't stop there. What needs to be explained is this. If Ukraine has managed to penetrate Russia's most protected Arctic installation with $1,000 drones, what else is about to happen across Russia's other borders? Russia has lost control of the narrative, and all of this has happened under Russia's nose. While it was distracted by the war in Ukraine and struggling with what the Norwegian intelligence service describes as difficulties in the shipyards, causing maintenance delays that are hampering the capabilities of many aging vessels. Finland has deployed motion sensors, satellite coverage, and rapid response units on its borders that can distinguish between people and animals, while sending real-time data to NATO command centers. But what is not widely understood is how Finland, a country of just 5.5 million people, managed to systematically compromise one of Russia's most strategic regions without ever pulling the trigger. The answer lies in Finland's approach to what experts call comprehensive security, in which national defense is seen as a task for the entire society, requiring the contributions of all citizens. According to Finnish broadcaster YLE, Moscow has begun building a garrison for an artillery brigade in the Murmansk region, but this represents a defensive repositioning rather than an offensive capability. The construction suggests Russia is preparing for a long-term standoff rather than projecting confidence in its border security. And yet, Finnish surveillance operations continue, untouched, unnoticed, and increasingly sophisticated. But what's particularly significant is that Finland has expanded its cyber units and doubled intelligence sharing with NATO, while setting conditions that could completely alter Russia's defensive posture in the region. Finland's defense spending is set to reach 3% of GDP by 2029 and 5% by 2032, in line with NATO's new commitment for all members to reach 5% by 2035. But that's not all. Every move near the border is recorded, modeled, and cross-referenced with NATO databases, which now include comprehensive information on Russian capabilities and vulnerabilities. Russia's attempts to change tactics have already been anticipated and neutralized by what experts describe as intelligence 2.3 steps ahead of the Russian command. The integration of Finnish capabilities into NATO's broader intelligence architecture means that Russian operations in the Arctic are now subject to unprecedented scrutiny, and yet the Kremlin continues to act as if nothing has changed. The Northern Sea route, which Russia claims as internal waters, faces what researchers describe as systemic vulnerabilities, including loss of Western technical support, communications failures, and the inability to maintain critical infrastructure without international cooperation. And here's the kicker for Moscow. Russia still believes it has the upper hand in the north, despite evidence to the contrary. Deep in the Arctic, new listening stations are picking up more than just radio signals. They're capturing movement patterns, communications protocols, and operational vulnerabilities that suggest Russia's northern defenses are far more compromised than Moscow is willing to admit. That said, Finland has not only reinforced its border, it has rewritten the rules of modern Arctic defense. Russia, once confident of its dominance in the north, now faces a silent threat that it cannot effectively deter, control, or counter.